Hey, it's Josh Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And right now we're revisiting the Moto G, which is, quite frankly, the most affordable Android device that you can get right now. At $179 for an unlocked phone, you have a real steal here, and it could be the best bang for buck phone available today. So what we have here are, for the most part, what are considered mid-range specs. However, what we have been learning over the past, let's say, 5 or 6 months, is that you don't need high-end specifications to provide a nice, smooth performance. So, with that in mind, we're going to put this up against one of the top dogs in the game. And obviously that would be the Snapdragon 800. And the most recent iteration, and probably the best benchmark for this, would be the Nexus 5. After all, it is running stock Android 4.4 KitKat. And while the Moto G won't be getting KitKat until January, we can still pit these two together because they do provide very similar experiences. After all, the Moto G is somewhat stock Android, pretty much as close as you can get without actually being stock Android like on the Nexus 5. So for the purposes of this test, I had both of the phones turned off and then turned on again, restarted if you will, so that none of the apps that were opened in this test were kept in the background. They were freshly opened from scratch. So here I am restarting either device. I will also say that both of these tests were done on the particular phone separately, not together in the same shot. The reason why is because I wanted to sync up the very time that I press the button for whatever app or whatever function on either device. So what you're seeing here are two shots that are synced together to show you what the speed would be like for either one. Check my Wi-Fi and make sure that I'm connected to it, and there you go. So here is the first test. I had Android Authority already somewhat typed into the browser, so I just got to the browser and we see how long it would take to load. As you can see here, it is actually very comparable, and when I move on to the desktop site version of Android Authority, it does seem to kind of load up about the same amount of time for either phone. However, the Moto G did somewhat get stuck trying to load maybe one or two last elements. However, for the most part, the majority of the page was loaded up about the same time for either one. When it comes to the apps, on the other hand, I did see that the Moto G was just really a smidgen behind the Nexus 5. Now, in very technical terms, the Moto G probably doesn't load everything as fast, but in just what you see on both devices, if you were to use these in the real world, you would see that the Moto G is just a little bit slower than the Nexus 5, but not by so much that you would really notice. Now, that's very impressive. Now here, the same thing goes for Instagram. As I said before, the Moto G just lags right behind the Nexus 5. Lag is probably even too strong of a word. It really is just directly behind it. And finally, here is the loading of Plants vs. Zombies 2. Now, as you can see here, the Nexus 5 does load it up just a smidgen faster, and also when you get to the loading screen, it does seem like the Nexus 5 just loads the game a little bit faster to where you can just hit play and get going. And what we found in this test is that even though the Moto G empirically is a little bit slower than the Nexus 5, it really wasn't so slow that it would hinder from your experience. Literally, if this was a neck and neck race, you would see the Moto G losing by really just that much. So while this test may not have been completely scientific, what I did want to show you was, in the best of circumstances, what a real-world situation might look like when you're loading these particular apps, or this game, or browsing the web. And from what we see here, the Moto G really isn't that shabby at all. And like I said, my full review is on its way, and I will explain to you why in that review I find the Moto G, after the last few days, why I find it to be a pretty nice breath of fresh air. Stay tuned to Android Authority for that and for all of our other coverage. Drop us likes on our videos and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And don't forget to follow us on social media. If you want to follow me from time to time, you can find me on Google+ under Joshua Vergara, and of course on Twitter and Instagram under Josh Salutes. Keep it tuned here because we are your source for all things Android.